Good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you are. My name is Mary Laplante. I'm Vice President of Client Services for Digital Clarity Group, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to our February Get Clarity webinar. Today we take a clear-eyed look at the Customer Experience Management Imperative, the increasingly critical requirement to consciously manage the experience that we deliver to consumers in the broadest sense of that word, to customers, prospects, partners, employees, and citizens. No matter what the context, B2B, B2C, B2E, or B2G, consumers are demanding that you play the game by their rules, not yours. Today, CEM, Customer Experience Management, is the new playbook for proactive response. But as with any emergent business practice, there's considerable confusion, debate, and mystery associated with customer experience management. If you have CEM initiatives underway, then you're all too familiar with the difficulties of getting your stakeholders on the same page of that playbook. If you're just starting to gather your CEM stakeholders, from executives to individual contributors, then you're no doubt becoming aware that CEM means different things to different people, that there's skepticism about CEM as mere vendor hype, that having a mobile app will solve everything that's wrong with the way your company attracts, secures, and engages its customers. If you're just starting to think about formal CEM strategies and tactics, then you have an opportunity to start informed conversations with CEM stakeholders. So no matter where you are with CEM adoption, today we'll examine the inconvenient truths and the dangerous misconceptions about CEM. Our goal is to help you arm yourself with the truth about CEM and with knowledge that will enable your stakeholders to make informed decisions about vision, strategy, tactics, and plans to transform the experience that you deliver. A few housekeeping notes before we start. The webinar is being recorded. Webinar is being recorded. We'll answer questions at the end, but you don't need to wait until the end to submit them. You can enter them on the question window on the GoToWebinar console at any time throughout the webinar. All attendees will receive an advanced copy of our newest paper entitled The CEM Imperative, Experience Management in the Age of the Empowered Consumer, on which today's webinar is based. And finally, we're live tweeting the event using our handle at @just_clarity, which is shown in the footer of today's visuals. For those of you who might not be familiar with Digital Clarity Group, we are a research-based advisory firm focused on the technologies and practices that drive customer experience management in the digital age. Our clients are enterprise adopters, technology suppliers, and service providers who build and deploy solutions for CEM. We conduct and publish research, offer consulting services, and are recognized thought leaders in the markets that we cover. Our CEM expert today is my colleague, Tim Walters, partner and principal analyst at DCG. Tim is a frequent and well-respected contributor to the industry conversations about managing experience. At DCG, he covers digital disruption, the technologies and practices within the CEM footprint, including web content management, the future of work and intranets, and translation and globalization. Tim has most recently authored the CEM Imperative, and he served as study director for our guide to service providers for web content and customer experience management. Prior to DCG, Tim was senior analyst and advisor at Forrester Research and served as director of international marketing and strategy for FatWire Software, where he was instrumental in charting the transition from WCM to web experience management, so he comes by his credentials honestly. Tim, I believe you're going to start us off with what's perhaps one of the most confusing of all CEM issues.
Exactly, Mary. First of all, thanks. It's a pleasure to be discussing this very important topic today. And in fact, I hope to show in the few minutes that we have together that this is the single most important initiative for virtually any business anywhere in the world today. And it's also a relief to see that so many, there are so many participants on the call who are expressing interest in CEM. So as you said, let me clarify the acronyms or initialisms that surround this space and cause a great deal of confusion. At DCG, we prefer, as Mary has said, CEM for Customer Experience Management. CXM is a frequent variation for exactly the same expression. You'll also hear WEM for Web Experience Management or Web Engagement Management, usually from vendors, and then usually, because their software tools, I have to say, are still focused more or less on the web channels. And then there's also Digital Experience Management, which can be DEM or DXM. And then there's the rather horrifying Web and Digital Experience Management, which causes Homer so much grief in this graphic. And I'll show later on why we find these latter titles, WEM, DXM, WDEM, too restrictive for the scope of customer experience management. So very quickly, just the flow for the presentation. Mary and I will address what CEM is and what it isn't, and we'll provide Digital Clarity Group's definition. And we'll look at some survey data that I think clearly establishes why CEM must be an imperative that no company can afford to ignore. We'll look at the claim that CEM is just hype, designed to sell software and services by instilling the dreaded fear, uncertainty, and doubt. And then we'll explore the digital disruptions that have created this CEM imperative and the growing number of vendors and digital solutions that claim to address and potentially even quote-unquote solve CEM. And finally, we'll show why CEM calls for a new era of mutually beneficial partnerships between companies and service providers such as agencies, systems integrators, and consultants. This is a quote from the paper that Mary described, and it's effectively the premise of the case that I want to make for the CEM imperative. So let me just read it. Consumers are empowered by information and shared opinions, and they are emboldened by choice. They have developed an appetite for rich and rewarding interactions, and they rarely hesitate to seek alternatives when disappointed. Increasingly, companies will succeed and fail according to the quality of the digital experiences that they offer. If you don't agree with that statement by the end of this hour, then we have quite frankly failed in our endeavor this afternoon.
So Tim, I guess, one of the, you've got a slide here that says dangerous misconception number one. I'm sure you'll talk about these things, but, if it's not these, what exactly is customer experience management?
Exactly. So, yeah, I'm constantly led astray and kind of seduced and then disappointed by emails with subject lines like, top principles of CEM or CEM predictions for 2014, and then I open up the email and it turns out they're talking about a call center solution or human resource management innovations or the use of beacons in retail and so on and so forth. All of those things are not unimportant, but they do not capture anything near the totality of CEM. So let's look at Digital Clarity Group's definition. So, at DCG, we believe that CEM is both something old and something new. It's old in the sense that customer experience has been around as a philosophy and as a business goal for many years, even if it was never as popular or as widespread as many advocates of customer experience hoped. And there has been a discipline offering and a number of vendors and service providers offering assistance with improving and managing customer experience for years as well, even if few actually called it until recently CEM or CXM. But CEM is also new because, as we'll see shortly, the digital disruptions of the past 6 years or so have fundamentally changed the very meaning of consumer and granted an entirely new kind of urgency to the need to manage customer experiences. So here's our working definition. It begins with customer experience, often abbreviated CX, which encompasses the totality of a customer's interactions. And this is why we think any attempt to restrict customer experience management to web experience or digital experience management is flawed. And note also that in this definition, customer, the word customer, refers to potential, actual, and past customers. That is to prospects, current customers, and even those who might never again complete a transaction but could be valuable advocates, say parents who still remember happily the summer camp that their child attended 15 years ago and are pleased to promote it to anyone who will listen. As a business discipline, CEM addresses not only technical solutions, but the entire complex system of research practices, strategic development, business processes, skills and human resources, software solutions, organizational philosophies and values, and the partnerships that you establish to supplement or extend any of these and some other things in order to deliver superior customer experiences. And then finally, with specific reference to software, CEM refers to a broad and constantly changing ecosystem of tools and associated strategies, associated services, sorry.
Tim, I think there's a couple of things about that definition that are really interesting. For one, you know, it's good to point out that the principles behind CEM are old but new again. The totality of the experience, the fact that CEM is actually a business practice and not a technology. What are some of the implications of that definition? You know, what does it really mean to our audience?
Yeah, exactly. I think there are four, so let's look at these two initially. CEM is a company-wide commitment. It's not a line of business fix for the call center, etc. It's certainly great that you can deploy technology or make business process improvements that increase, say, the win rate of your sales team. It's great if you can increase satisfaction rates and reduce escalations in the call center. But I certainly hope that no executive is seriously going to claim that by achieving these kinds of things, their company has taken care of the problem of customer experience management. Secondly, customer experience at the broadest level can be influenced by innumerable, not only innumerable digital interactions, not only on the website clearly, but also by innumerable analog factors. I mean, we've said that it encompasses the totality of a consumer's interactions with a company or brand. So things like my reaction to the quality of the towels in the hotel room, my feeling about the way I'm treated by a bank teller, the arrangements of products on a shelf when I'm shopping, the pronouncements by the CEO on a news program. The totality of interactions, they obviously can't be managed by a software solution. That's part of the limitation of the technology response to CEM. And indeed, encouraging positive customer experiences across all touch points really depends upon a company-wide commitment to customer centricity as a core business value of the entire organization. And yet, having said that, the fact is that digital is increasingly replacing, or more accurately, supplementing analog interactions. So in some C&A stores in Brazil, for example, the clothes hangers display in real time how many Facebook likes that product has received. In Walmart stores, they've experimented with an app that allows you to enter the store, scan the products, put them in your shopping cart, and pay all through the app without ever interacting with anybody in the store. Many hotels are beginning to introduce self-service check-in and check-out on devices like iPads. And in some Home Depot stores, you can scan a code on a shelf or on a product and get videos about product details, how-to videos, user ratings, product recommendations, comparative shopping information, and so forth. So in this case and many others, in these instances and many others rather, digital, I mean, what we think of as analog aspects of interactions with a company or a brand are being, in some cases, replaced by, but in many other cases, supplemented and enhanced by digital content and processes around their production and management. Mm-hmm. So back to the upshots of that definition. Thirdly, CEM is not the name of a software solution that you can purchase and plug in and turn on and have it solve some problems. It is true that some vendors now offer suites that combine many of the key functional elements of customer experience management, including web content management, analytics, personalization, marketing campaign management, mobile enablement, and so forth. And as CEM efforts necessarily expand beyond the browser and mobile interactions, broader enterprise systems such as CRM and ERP and internal collaboration and information governance will have to integrate with such marketing-centric tools to support the complete customer journey. I have this notion that CEM is going to signal the revenge of enterprise software suites around CRM, ERP, employee collaboration, and so forth. Right. And finally, very few organizations have all of the in-house resources necessary to deploy the technologies and formulate the strategies and optimize the outcomes. So in our view, most companies should and will, and in fact are, turning to external service providers, whether those are agencies, systems integrators, consultants, boutique firms, and so forth, for assistance with CEM, at least in the initial phases. And I think more and more often we're going to see it's not only in the initial phases because organizations are realizing that this is a true strategic commitment that has to be analyzed and optimized on an ongoing basis.
You know, I think the idea that, I love the examples because they reinforce even our physical experiences now are supported by digital. And so intellectually, I think many of us get the whole connection here. But, you know, at the end of the day, do customers really care all that much, even if they get it intellectually?
Yeah. Yeah, so this is the fun data part. So it is, for me, frankly, astonishing how demanding and fickle and disloyal or anti-loyal, I guess, consumers have become, demonstrably become in just the past few years. So at our Digital Pulse conference that we hosted in Boston in October, we argued that with my colleague Robert Rose, we argued that the consumers are becoming like the zombies, specifically the zombies in World War Z. That is, they're voracious, insatiable, demanding, capricious, ever-present, and they're fast-moving and inescapable. So just look at these findings from a Harris Interactive survey of U.S. consumers, representative of all U.S. consumers, in late 2012. So you see 1% say that their experiences for customer experience, their expectations for customer experience are always met. 89% say not only would they theoretically switch business due to poor experiences, but that they already had by that point that the survey was done. And 86% say that they will pay extra to ensure a good customer experience. And they said they would pay up to 25% extra. So in other words, if you think about this statistically, virtually none of your customers are entirely satisfied with the experiences that you offer. 9 out of 10 of them will switch to a competitor in a heartbeat, and most of them are willing to pay you to improve the quality of the experiences that you provide.
How does that translate into real business impact? You know, you've just shared with us some of the research about our behaviors. What does that mean to the bottom line of the businesses?
Yep. Yeah, there's some good numbers on this too, and actually good and depressing numbers. So in another survey in 2012, over 1,300 executives worldwide were asked to estimate the cost of not providing positive, consistent, and brand-relevant experiences, and they answered on average 20% of total revenue. Now, you can do the math as a listener for your company, whether your organization has 250 million in revenue, a billion, 5 billion in revenue. Nevertheless, this is going to turn out to be an astonishing figure.
Yeah, you're right. That is both impressive and depressing at the same time. But, that's only one statistic. As, we're analysts. We're always suspicious.
Yeah.
What else you got there?
Yeah, you should definitely be suspicious of any one study. Although, on the other hand, I have to say, it looks like a high-quality study. It's large, over 1,300 executives. It's global. But let's assume, just for the sake of argument and healthy skepticism, let's assume that the numbers are somewhat off. Maybe all of those executives had a collective bad hair day and overestimated the impact of poor customer experiences. But so let's imagine a smallish company, $50 million in revenue. And I choose that figure because 50 million euros is the kind of standard upper limit for mid-market companies in Germany. And as you may know, mid-market companies, so-called Mittelstand companies in Germany, are the heart of German industrial prowess. They make up something like well over 90% of the German GNP. So it's very important that those smallish kinds of organizations thrive. So if we assume that the impact of poor customer experience is not the 20% of revenue that the executives estimated, let's say it's only half of that much, or let's say it's only a quarter of that much, or let's say it's only an eighth of what they estimated, that's still $1.25 million per year lost to poor customer experiences for a relatively small company with $50 million in revenue.
Yep.
Here's an even scarier number that I just came across, and it's so scary that the first time I tried to write it out, in digits, I came up with 5 billion. 5,900 million. I had to kind of exercise rigor in order to write it out clearly. On the basis of their 2013 Global Customer Pulse Survey, Accenture has just recently estimated that there is up to $5.9 trillion in revenue that is what they call in play globally due to consumers switching product and service providers. And they estimated that the amount in North America alone is 1.4 trillion. Now again, the absolute number isn't very important. Maybe it's only merely hundreds of billions of dollars that are at stake in North America rather than over 1,000 billion. But with that kind of prize at stake, isn't this a competition that you want to be part of? Isn't this a race that your company should be willing and eager to enter? I think the answer is clearly yes. But the bad news is that you have no choice. You cannot not be a part of this race because competing for customers and revenue with experiences is today the basic condition of doing business as such. And the worst news is that these hundreds of billions of dollars are not prize money for this race that are put up by some kind of organizers. The money paid to the winners is taken from the losers. Failing to place near the top in CEM isn't just unfortunate and disappointing, it is financially disastrous since the laggards actually pay out to the leaders.
Tim, we do a lot of business case development with our clients on the user side. And, some of the folks in our audience might be doing quick back-of-the-napkin calculations. And, even in the face of the challenge you just laid down, one of the most common critiques of CEM is that, oh, it's just all hype. Fact or fiction? How do you deal with that?
Yeah. So I love talking about this. First of all, I want to offer a brief defense of software marketers. And I'm not sure they'll be happy with my defense, but I say this as a former software marketer. As you noted, I ran marketing and strategy for Fatwire internationally for a number of years. My view is that vendor marketing always necessarily has a large element of hype, at least when you're marketing relatively complex technologies like enterprise software packages and services. The reason is that vendors state what the product can do. That's all they can do. But it's up to the buyers to determine what that product will be able to do for them, given their existing environment, given their skill levels, given their other constraints or conditions. And after all, that determination, figuring out what is the delta between what the product can do and what it will actually deliver in my environment, given my business context, that's the point of a well-run vendor evaluation and selection process. That's why you should invest a lot of time and effort into those evaluation processes rather than just buying the product that's in the upper right-hand corner of some analyst report. So secondly, to address the question of hype, call me a cynic, but I'm also very suspicious of accusations that this or that thing is just hype, because they always accompany breakthrough innovations, and they are almost always proven to be hilariously wrong. So think about the denunciations of the limitations or appeal of mainframe computers, and then PCs, and then e-commerce, and then cloud computing, and then 140-character microblogging, and so forth. I often have this notion that denouncing hype is itself just hype, hyper-hype. So here's a quote from the report again, and I don't want to read it, but the real reason for being relatively sure, quite sure, that CEM is not just hype is that the need for CEM is entirely and only, can be only driven by customers in the broad sense noted in our definition, prospects, partners, constituents, etc. If your company or organization genuinely doesn't feel any pressure from your customers to improve unsatisfactory interactions, assuming that you've researched and investigated and know that they don't care about unsatisfactory interactions. If you can honestly say, contrary to all of our data, our customers and to all of that data, our customers and our prospects are entirely satisfied with the experiences we offer, then congratulations. You don't need any customer experience management tools or services or business processes or partnerships. You're not, maybe you're that unknown company that is already doing everything right. On the other hand, it may just be, and I think this is more likely, that you're like those zombies we mentioned earlier. You're already dead, but you just haven't realized it yet.
Tim, I think one of the interesting things here to point out and to really make clear is that, this is driven by customers. Customers vote with their money, regardless of what the vendors would really like to think. So let's follow that a little bit. If customers are voting with their money and customers are driving CEM, I think it's worth taking a look at some of the forces that have driven us to the point where CEM is actually, becoming a business imperative.
Yeah, exactly. What got us into this position?
Exactly.
from a company point of view. So the power that consumers have acquired in the last few years is concentrated. It's not exclusively, but it's concentrated around unprecedented quality of voice and extent of choice. So not very long ago, I hope all of us listening can remember this, information and insights were controlled by monopolies and doled out on their terms. So for example, say you were interested in spending a few days at some resort in Mexico. You could request a brochure to be mailed to you. You could ask a travel agent for more information, who was probably getting commissions from the hotel. You could find a few sentences about the resort in a travel guide at the library or at a bookstore. And if that didn't, if the reality once you visited didn't match up to the marketing, what could you do? You could lick a stamp and mail a letter to the Complaint Center where your side of the story would just die in a pile with hundreds of equally impotent appeals. Or you might register a more direct complaint, like the frustrated diner in this photo. But what? It would be seen by a handful of employees, and it would really only impact the busboy who has to clean up the table. So the social web forced businesses to end that drip feed monologue and the control that they had over the gateways of information flow, and to begin a genuine conversation with consumers, and then very quickly to hand control of that conversation to the crowd. It eroded consumer loyalty, as we said earlier, by exposing it in many cases, I think, as a kind of enslavement that was enforced by ignorance of the alternatives. Sure, I kept going back to the same hotel over and over again because I didn't know if one of the others was going to be better. But when I have access to TripAdvisor and can read dozens of reviews that indicate that I can be pretty sure I'm going to have a better experience there, I will immediately switch allegiances. That it created a very tall soapbox for anyone who wished to condemn or compliment a product or a service, and it enabled boundless, constantly updated troves of information where previously there were, these corporate ministries of propaganda. It granted voice and choice to disenfranchised consumers, and it turned the web from a solitary activity into a force of solidarity.
And it's the case too that mobile just provides access to that voice and choice anywhere, anytime, right?
That's the key thing, is that social is a huge enabler. But if we still had access to social networks only on our PCs or our desktop computers when we were sitting there where the desktop is, or even only on our laptops, it would have much, much less impact. It's the ubiquity of access that's provided by mobile devices that is key. And this is the misconception about the mobile shift. Many people still think of it in terms of a shift from one kind of computing device to another. I used to primarily access the internet and computing services on my notebook, and now I don't do that anymore. I do it on my mobile device. And thus you have these announcements of it's the post-PC era, and Wired magazine proclaiming the death of the web, and so on and so forth. But what's really important about mobility is that it provides this ubiquitous access to computing services. It's not really about a type of computer. It's about a mode of consumption. It's not about using a different kind of thing. It's about a different mode of being. So whether you access the internet through your smartphone, a tablet, a desktop PC, a television, a gaming platform, you're participating in this constant cycle of ubiquitous content consumption.
So let's imagine that a company is actually, let's take a step back. We've got mobile apps, we've got programs to do great in-store experience. Can that company rest on its laurels? Can they relax? What do you do if you're doing pieces of this right today?
Yeah, so we need to stop thinking of consumers, as we have for decades, if not longer, as potential buyers of goods and services, and instead think of these constantly hungry and demanding beasts that consume experiences. Their appetite, the appetite of the consumer for fresh and differentiated and unusual experiences is frankly insatiable. It will never be satisfied, because the exceptional, what is exceptional today rapidly becomes the expected, and then the expected becomes the mundane and the unremarkable and the normal, and so I go looking again for something that's abnormal and exceptional. There's this, there is no permanent cool, in the realm of customer experience. What's buzzworthy today, a site, an app, a game, a product feature, a service offering, one of those heartwarming stories of customer centricity where they find the boy's lost stuffed animal and mail it back to him and pose it in in chairs around the pool and so forth. Those kinds of things don't change overnight. It's still a great app. It's still the great app that it was yesterday, but the mere passage of time renders what's great today, as we say in Germany where I live, Schnee von gestern, yesterday's snow, right? No matter where you live, yesterday's snow is not that appealing. It has to be fresh and, you know, as it were, edible if you're still a child.
So let's take a look now at the issue of, you know, what about these software solutions for CEM? What's in that bucket there?
So, right, as we noted earlier, the software ecosystem for CEM is varied, to say the least, and it is volatile. It is not just constantly growing, it's constantly changing. But what I want to stress here is this notion of software solutions. You know, vendors, we use this term a lot. Vendors offer software solutions. Users, frankly, ask for software solutions. Analysts like us analyze and evaluate software solutions. And in fact, I've used the term already earlier in this presentation. It's hard to avoid. But the fact is that at least in the realm of CEM, and I think in many other contexts as well, there is no such thing as a software solution for the simple reason that software itself doesn't solve the challenge. Right? Maybe in limited accounting problems or business issues, for example, some accounting software provides a solution. But in the case of CEM, that is nowhere near the truth. So software contributes to a genuine CEM solution only when it has been processed, let's say, through what we call the 3 I's. That is, it has been implemented, integrated, and incorporated into well-conceived and constantly optimized processes that support customer experience goals. So implementation. It's a truism that software is not a solution but a tool, and that its impact depends on how it will be put to use. But in fact, software isn't even a tool until it is installed and implemented into its operating environment, clearly. Integration, today, first generation, say, content management systems were often implemented as standalone applications in siloed business usage and so forth. Today, CEM applications have to be, whether they're WCM or campaign management or another part of that complex ecosystem, have to be extensively integrated with each other, as well as integrated with infrastructure and enterprise applications, so-called systems of record, that may be located on-premise or located on in the cloud and so forth. In other words, the integration challenge becomes much, much more dramatic in the case of CEM applications. And finally, it needs to be incorporated into ongoing and optimized processes. The go-live date of a CEM initiative is not the end of the process at all. It's not even the beginning of the end. You see where I'm going here with apologies to Churchill. It's not even the end of the beginning. The pace of change and the power of consumers render a CEM initiative so dynamic that it really approaches volatility. It must be constantly monitored, carefully analyzed, and incessantly optimized. So in the paper, again, for our final quote, we put it this way: as the number and variety of software applications supporting a process increases, so does the role of these 3 I's, and it increases not just proportionally, but at a multiple that reflects the growing complexity. In other words, the more complex your business process and business challenge that you're trying to address, the more important become the non-technical aspects of it. So the tag here is the more software you need, the less important it becomes to your overall success.
You know, Tim, in the webinar that we did last month on the role of the service provider, one of the points we made there is the question isn't if you need services, but who will provide those services. Yeah. So, you know, many firms, some firms might be able to do their own job with CEM, but you know, what's the general capabilities out there?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we've done a lot of research on this in the last, well, ongoing for the last 2 years, basically. And first of all, you know, as we noted earlier, we firmly believe, or the evidence indicates, that for most organizations, either you don't have all the resources and skills and expertise internally in order to deliver on all the aspects of CEM, or you shouldn't have all of the resources, skills, and expertise, because if you do, it means that you're operating far from your core competency and differentiators. I mean, you're basically, it means that you've got a digital agency and specific business consultancy skills in-house, and those should probably be outsourced so that you can focus on your true core strengths. So all of that research has gone into the first of a whole series of reports that we're producing on the role of service providers for web content and customer experience management. So the first one came out covering the North American market in August of 2013 with, I think, about 44 service providers in it, detailed evaluations and analyses of their strengths, their approach to projects, and so on and so forth. And the reason that we did that is because we're firmly convinced that every organization that we've seen and that we can imagine is going to increasingly need to turn to those kinds of service providers and partners in order to be successful with customer experience management.
So as we wrap up here, we're coming up to our question time. What are the implications? What does all this mean for the folks on the call today?
Yeah, I think there are at least these four in this slide, and maybe a few others. One of them, I would say, you know, look in a mirror and see yourself as a consumer, because we spend a tremendous amount of time as you know, as business professionals and as analysts and maybe also as vendors trying to understand what constitutes a great standout customer experience. And yet we're all customers, we're all consumers, and we know precisely how demanding we are and how we react in terms of poor customer experiences. And you know, so if you think as a consumer and constantly remain within that mindset, then you're able to take the right kind of attitude towards the ways in which your company is operating. And so my second point that's also not on the slide is look at your company from the perspective of a customer. I often like to say the greatest service that any employee can do for their company in the age of customer experience management is to not think like an employee, not to be a cheerleader for the company and its products, but to be a cynic and to look at the company and its offerings precisely as a consumer would, and to constantly, mercilessly evaluate them from that perspective. And you very, very quickly discover many, many deficiencies in the way that your company is operating that tend to be hidden when you're trying to be a devoted and enthusiastic employee. Thirdly, then, you know, act now. There is no time to wait. Customers want, and we know this again as consumers ourselves, rich experiences today. If you go to a restaurant and the food is awful, you're not going to say, well, the chef is distracted because he's opening up another place across town, so I'm going to keep coming back anyway. Right? we don't know, consumers don't know about your budget constraints. They don't know about the fact that you have to finish a factory in China, and they don't care if they do know. They judge you only on the basis of the experiences that you offer. Fourth, embrace, I love this term, experiments, and that is ongoing experiments that are actually tied to measuring, evaluating, and improving the experiences that customers have with you. So very quickly, the lean methodologies that came up around what used to be called, I think, the lean startup methodology, but we now know that that's not only applicable to startups. Those lean methodologies of creating a minimum viable product, testing it, producing validated learning, applying those learnings to the next cycle of experiments and so forth. That's exactly what organizations of virtually all kinds need to be doing on a constant basis. More generally, identify the gaps and the vendor service partners, identify the gaps that you can see in your organization and in your offerings, and then identify the vendors, technology vendors, and the service partners that can fill them. And finally, build long-term partnerships. There was just an article in Ad Age last week, I think, or the week before, that had, it was quite astonishing because it was agencies, digital agencies, and advertising agencies complaining about the way in which they're treated by organizations. Now, of course, that's a one-sided story, but it's quite remarkable that in the age when everybody needs to be improving their customer experience offerings, organizations are still trying to cut back on the budgets and the resources that are dedicated to those very offerings. And you need to look at these service provider partners not as a temporary fix, not as a build, deliver, and goodbye relationship, but as a long-term partnership that's going to feed into strategic decisions, that's going to help you identify differentiated offerings that you would not otherwise see, and that can really be there as a true partner that is going to provide the kind of expertise, true insight into your organization, and flexibility that allows you to react very, very quickly as the market demands.
Okay, I think that just about wraps up the formal part of our session today. If you'd like some additional information and details behind the key concepts that Tim presented today, you can read more in our new paper, the CEM Imperative. As I mentioned at the beginning, all of our registrants and attendees will receive an advanced copy. This is not yet up on our website, so you'll be out ahead of the crowd. The paper is actually part of our larger 2014 research agenda, where we'll be looking at a number of topics related to the CEM Imperative. It is our organizing theme for our research. And for more information about what you've heard today and some contacts, we'll leave this slide up while we take a look at a question. And Tim, I do have one here, and I'm going to paraphrase this only because we have a lot of experience behind this. Someone in our audience has gone back to the question of digital marketing equals CEM. And the question is something like, in our organization, the digital marketing team controls all of this, and we realize that that may be a risk. What is a strategy for beginning to bring others into the conversation besides the digital marketing team? Any advice?
Yeah, well, that could be another hour-long webinar. So
Exactly.
very quickly, I think, on the one hand, that sounds like it's pointing to the age-old problem of, political turf battles within the organization, and marketers think they own, let's call it the customer relationship, and they, darn it, they want to continue to own the customer relationship, even though it's fundamentally transformed in the ways that we've been talking about. I think that, not to trivialize it, but I think that has to be addressed by some kind of higher power, like a C kind of higher power, who can realize, perhaps because they've been educated by some of the listeners of the webinar, who can use some of the evidence or can find the evidence to make the business case for CEM and help high-level executives realize the ways in which the world has changed and the terms of competing successfully, how those have been fundamentally transformed, and then make the case for approaching customers and customer engagement and customer experience in a new way, and that new way will necessarily be broader, more holistic, more representative of all parts of the organization that could in any way touch or influence the customer experience. So very often, practically speaking, we recommend the organization of something. It's sometimes called a digital council, but I've already said digital is a little too restrictive. Maybe it's called a customer experience council, a customer journey council, and they sit directly below the highest level executive organization. And that council has ownership, from a governance perspective, ownership and responsibility for any initiative that is aimed at supporting or hopefully improving the quality of customer experiences. And then individual line of businesses or individual parts of the organization, such as marketing or specifically digital marketing or the call center or sales enablement or brick and mortar storefront activities, all feed into that council, which is responsible for trying to ensure that they represent a coherent and cohesive response from the perspective of the customer. Mm-hmm.
That notion of the council as sort of where the vision resides is an interesting one, and I think that's an interesting piece of advice here for folks who are just getting started, is to pull those folks together who have that vision.
Yeah.
We have one more question here, and it has to do with the role of the service provider. We did touch on that with the 3 I's. Mm-hmm. And the question essentially is, what's best practice today? Should we get recommendations on service providers from our vendors, or should we start with the service providers?
I'll answer that question, but I'm going to resist the notion of best practices, because I don't say this merely to be nasty or difficult, but I really think that the space of customer experience management is so fresh and more importantly changing so quickly that at least right now we don't have best practices, and I kind of suspect that we may never have best practices again in this realm, because best practices mean that something has settled down long enough to become somewhat normalized, and then you can say what is usually a winning approach. And I don't know that we're going to be there with CEM at the rate of change that we're seeing now. But in any case, what's advisable? I think that we would say that it is shifting towards selecting your service providers first and having them assist you with the selection of the technologies, assuming that is that you really do your homework with the selection of the service provider. It kind of makes your upfront investment harder because you really need to make extra sure that you're picking the right service provider, right meaning many things, but for example, that can really be a devoted partner and build a beneficial, mutually beneficial relationship that really has the technical breadth and expertise to recommend and to implement the technologies that are appropriate for you rather than the ones that they happen to have partnerships with, and so forth. That can really be a trusted advisor rather than promoting products based on their commercial relationships. If you can find that kind of service provider, then you're in a position to have them give you genuinely objective guidance in terms of the technologies that you might want to advance going forward. The alternative is to bring in some kind of third-party assistance. One, for the selection of the service provider, or if you want to select a technology in isolation, as it were, at least look for third-party assistance with those technology evaluations, whether it's around WCM or one of the other core components of CEM. Usually we think that this is becoming so important, in contradistinction to a WCM implementation even a few years ago, which, as we said, was probably a silo and probably there in order to run your websites. Today, those core components of CEM are becoming so important to your overall business success that you need to be very, very sure that you're picking the right solution. And so the value of having a third-party analyst firm or other kind of consultant come in and assist you with that has grown.
Right. And I think we did touch on some of that in last month's Get Clarity webinar, where Joe presented some of the research underlying the guides, the European version that's coming up and the North American version that we're updating.
Yep.
Well, we're at the top of the hour. I want to thank everybody who has joined us. Thanks, Tim, for a great conversation. The replay of our webinar will be available soon, and look for a follow-up email from us with a copy of the paper, and stay tuned for information about next month's Get Clarity webinar, topic to be determined. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.